A bezel-less screen, dual cameras, an all-metal build, and a headphone jack on a smartphone that doesn't cost an arm and a leg. Is it too good to be true? Let's take a look at the Honor 7X. So right off the bat, the Honor 7X has a design that looks very, very familiar. It reminds me a lot of the iPhone 6 or iPhone 7 design. It even has the antenna bands near the top and bottom, but they're pretty small and blend in quite well with the metal, especially on the matte black version. Otherwise, it's a seamless all-metal design with rounded corners and sides, and it feels really comfortable to hold. It's relatively easy to operate in one hand because it's a pretty narrow phone, and even though the metal is completely smooth, it doesn't feel all that slippery. On the back side is the fingerprint sensor, and it's in a nice comfortable spot that's easy to reach with your index finger, and it's also very fast at unlocking. Pretty much the second I rest my finger on it, the phone immediately wakes right up. There's a single speaker on the bottom, and it's a perfectly serviceable speaker, but there's nothing too amazing about the way it sounds. The phone does, however, make up for it with a headphone jack, which is something that has slowly faded away in 2017. The only thing that I thought was a little weird is that it doesn't use a USB Type-C port, and instead it uses micro USB. If this was a couple of years ago when USB Type-C was still in its infancy, I don't think this would have been that big of a deal, but pretty much every phone out there now uses USB Type-C, so it's just strange to see a brand new phone in 2017 that consumers will be using for at least a year or two with an outdated port. The nice thing about the Honor 7X though is that it features a lot of the current smartphone trends that we're seeing in flagships, and it's cool that Honor is putting it in a much more affordable package. For starters, it has a 6-inch 18:9 screen with a resolution of 2160 by 1080, and it's surrounded by super thin bezels, so it's pretty much all screen on the front. The screen is LCD instead of AMOLED, so it's not going to have those deep blacks or the contrast ratio of AMOLED screens, but it still looks pretty nice. It's bright, has great viewing angles, and the colors are vibrant enough that it still looks pleasing to the eye when you're watching videos, playing games, or just casually using the phone. And even though the screen is 1080p instead of Quad HD, it still looks really, really sharp. The Honor 7X also comes with dual cameras. It has a 16 megapixel primary shooter and a secondary 2 megapixel lens, but unlike many other smartphones with dual cameras, this lens isn't used for taking photos. Instead, the secondary sensor is only there for capturing depth information, so you can get those bokeh out backgrounds with the camera's wide aperture mode. The wide aperture mode has been available on previous Honor and Huawei phones before, but it's still pretty cool. It lets you change the quote-unquote aperture from as wide as f.95 for that extremely shallow depth of field look, or as narrow as f16 if you'd rather have everything in focus. The nice thing about this mode is that you can readjust the aperture and point of focus after the fact, which can give your photos an entirely different look, and it's pretty impressive how well it works. Portrait mode is also available on both the rear and front-facing 8 megapixel camera, but it's not the best portrait mode that I've ever used. It has some trouble separating the background from the foreground, and sometimes the bokeh bleeds onto the subject, giving you this halo type of effect. Despite that, it's still a nice feature to have if you want that added level of depth, even if it doesn't work quite as well as portrait mode on other smartphones. In terms of general picture quality, it's actually a fairly decent shooter. In good lighting, you can capture some nice detail, and color reproduction is pretty pleasant with just the right amount of vibrancy and saturation to make the photos pop. It does, however, fall apart pretty quickly in low light, and there's no optical image stabilization, so the results are very muddy and soft in appearance, and you can definitely see the lack of sharpness when zooming in. Inside, the Honor 7X is running on a Kirin 659 chip with either 3 or 4 gigabytes of RAM depending on region, and Kirin, if you're not familiar with it, is Huawei and Honor's own in-house chipset. While this is more of a mid-range processor and isn't going to be quite as powerful as flagships, I've had zero performance issues with the 7X. Whether I'm multitasking, launching apps, playing games, or just casually scrolling through the interface, it's been pretty smooth and responsive, and I haven't noticed any hiccups, so you should be able to handle pretty much anything you throw at it. There's a pretty hefty 3340 mAh battery to get you through the day, and battery life on the 7X has been pretty good. I average around 4.5 to 5 hours of screen on time, which has been more than plenty to get me through a full day, and that's typically with quite a few hours of gaming, YouTube watching, listening to music, and other typical activities like texting and checking social media. On the software side of things, the Honor 7X is running Android Nougat at the moment with EMUI 5.1 on top, which is a pretty heavy skin that changes a lot of the aesthetics of Android. It does draw saw a lot of parallels to iOS with the way the icons look, the swipe down feature that's very similar to Spotlight, and it's no app drawer approach, but you do have the option to re-enable the app drawer if you want it, and it does offer some other nice features like customizable soft keys and the ability to run multiple instances of the same app, which is pretty useful for apps like Facebook or Snapchat that don't support multiple accounts. So you're probably wondering, how much does all of this cost? Well, it's extremely affordable. It'll be available in the US for $200, which is a pretty insane and aggressive price point, but what makes the Honor 7X truly compelling is that you get a lot of flagship characteristics like the 18:9 screen, the metal build, and dual cameras at a fraction of the cost of flagships. Overall, it's really impressive, and it's cool that Honor is able to deliver this type of experience with very few compromises. So if you're tight on a budget but you don't want to miss out on the hot flagship trends, take a look at the Honor 7X. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this review of the Honor 7X. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below. We definitely appreciate it. And also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already. And hit that notification bell while you're at it so you don't miss out on future videos. And of course, check us out on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Google+. All that good stuff will be linked down below. And check the website as well, AndroidAuthority.com, because we are your source for all things Android.